Charles, hello and welcome.
Kayley Harris, after all these years.
After all these years, we go back a fair way.
Some work with you on 2WS.
Yes.
And, you wouldn't remember me then. I was a lot taller and had black hair.
I do remember you.
I've taken a lot of pressure over the years and it's made me a lot shorter.
Has property done that to you, the pressure in the property?
God, it's there's so much talk about property. It just gets stronger and stronger and stronger every time. And I think we all need a rest from it. Not too much of a rest, but I think we need a rest.
Well, not for the next hour. Anyway,
no.
Coming up in the next hour, we're going to speak to Elizabeth Redman. She's a property reporter for The Australian. The return of Taswegians to the Apple Isle on the back of property. So these are people maybe who have left when they were younger and to look for work on the mainland, and now they're maybe marrying, having kids and going back.
They've made some money and gone back. Elizabeth Redman is a very experienced writer too. I have spoken to her in the past. So.
All right, fantastic. And around the grounds, we're going to look at Frankston in Victoria with Terry Alderman and Liverpool right here in Sydney with Greg Andison.
Yeah, both very, very experienced real estate practitioners. Both know their areas inside out. So be good, real good.
Well, that's what you want.
Well, but how interesting. We're going to go from Liverpool to Frankston, Liverpool, New South Wales to Frankston, Victoria. It's going to be quite interesting. And I always say it, that's what I like most about this segment is that we get to really have a look, because all you hear about is Sydney, Melbourne. Let's hear about some of the suburbs in Sydney that are going in different directions, or some of the suburbs in Melbourne that have got more upside than most people realise. And they're suburbs that we always talk about that people avoid some of the times, and there's, to me, some of the best suburbs to go to.
All right, look forward to hearing about that. That's around the grounds coming up a little later in the hour. We'll speak to Tom Panos as well. He's an auctioneer. He'll have the auction clearance rates. But look, let's get straight into it. The property markets continue to cool a little bit. Is that did I hear that on the weekend correctly?
Yeah, we've been hearing about that for a while, and the cooling effect is still not impacting as much on price as we'd like. The cooling effect is basically occurring if you go to an auction now and you look at the auctions, then they're not as energetic, as vibrant and moving as quickly as they were. There are fewer bidders turning up at auctions, so many auctioneers will tell you that there's only one bidder sometimes, and a number of agents are putting property on the market before auction if they get a good offer. So that's always an indication. But we did have that happen about a year ago, maybe a little bit more than a year ago. The same thing started to happen. And then they reduced interest rates, and of course off it went again. Now, I don't know what the impact of the 1st of July is going to have with first-home buyers. If first-home buyers come in a rush, that could push the market up slightly again, up the chain. So from a slowdown period, Kayley, I wouldn't say it's terrible at all. When you've got clearance rates across the nation at 69.1% and at Sydney at 73.1%, I wouldn't say too quickly that that's cooling.
Okay, so if 79% is a hot market or reasonably hot market, what's a normal market if we weren't in this bubble that we are at the moment? 55
to 60% clearance rate, where you're really working hard to get that transaction across the line. Mind you, it's auction numbers. It's not every transaction, because there are a lot more private treaty transactions than there are auction transactions. But they're a good guide, and Sydney's clearance rate was actually beaten this week by Adelaide, because it came in at 73.9%. So the market's moving and shifting right across the country. There's no real set pattern, but if you look at some of the stock that was released in Sydney just last week, apartment complexes, people were lining up. Off the plan sales, people were lining up again.
Because you hear talk of, there are so many apartments, when you drive around Sydney, Melbourne or Brisbane even, there are so many apartment blocks shooting up, particularly around railway stations, obviously. Are we in a danger of oversupply?
We've been looking at that for a while in some areas of Australia, absolutely. And my biggest concern is time. You know, when you go out and you buy something off the plan, I mean, I've been talking to a young guy who manages a restaurant, and he asked me for some real estate advice when I was in his restaurant one day, and I said, "What are you doing, George?" He said, "Well, I've bought a property off the plan." I said, "How long ago?" He said, "Well, it's almost 2 years and it's nearly finished." Now, when you're there 2 years ago and you're buying, and your energy, your job, your security is all there at that moment, what if that changes during that transition period down to at 2 years' time?
Can you not get out of it?
No. And the other thing is, builders can. Builders may have sunset clauses where they can walk away. If the prices are going really, really well, they can walk away and leave you high and dry in some cases. But the biggest issue is when you get down 2 years later, what you bought it for 2 years ago and what it might value at today that could be a problem. And many of the banks have been known to, because they got caught. There was a massive situation that occurred just in one building on the Gold Coast where people couldn't complete because the banks called for valuations, and the valuations came in lower
than what they'd bought it for.
They'd bought it for. And so now they either have to find extra money or they can't proceed. And valuers are gun shy, Kayley, because for a very good reason. During the last cycle where the market went crazy, valuers were blamed for overvaluing property when all they were doing was their job, and they were going about valuing properties to contract price. But when the market crashed, a lot of people sued. And so I would suspect that there's a few things that concern me. One is that valuers will be gun shy. Secondly, banks may call for valuations. Thirdly, if somebody wants to escape, say they're buyers from overseas, well, how are you going to hunt them down? How are you going to sort that out?
Get your money back.
Then you're going to go into resales, and if you go into resales and there's an oversupply in resales, it could reduce the prices even more, which could impact on valuation. So it's quite a significant cycle. We're not seeing it in good centres, but there certainly are areas across Australia where there's stress being felt.
But you don't have those problems if you're buying a unit, for example, that's brand new, but it has already been built and it's ready to go. Would that be a safer option?
Yeah, you know what you're getting. You can walk in.
You can see it and touch it.
And again, I think a lot of those will become available because I do think there will be a large number of buyers that possibly won't complete. You see, banks have also changed the rules too. Previously in a development, if I wanted to fund a development, I'd go to a bank and they'd say, look, you sell 50% of those off the plan and we will fund the development for you, which is great. Now they're saying of that 50% you sell, only 15%, meaning 35% left, can be overseas buyers, whereas before you could take it all the way up. So now they're putting limits on it, so that the developers have got to find domestic buyers before they can do anything significant with the development. And so that is also putting pressure on developers, and some of them have pulled out, some of them have sold their development sites, and people buying them are land banking and maybe waiting for the next boom. So there are a number of issues that could impact on that marketplace in a very short space of time.
Let's talk about first home buyers and these changes coming in on the 1st of July to do with stamp duty.
Yeah.
Are there a lot of people now, since those changes were announced a few weeks back, are people now waiting for the 1st of July to do that?
You've got one of those people sitting in this very room with us right now, and that's young John. He's out looking, and the first thing he said, well, why would I do anything now? I'll wait till the 1st of July. And if you go into an area where there is a significant number of opportunities for first home buyers, this could see vendors say, well, gee, maybe I can get more. And then all of a sudden, there's that movement in price. It's really funny how a lot of these things come into play. There are good initiatives, but they're not really thought through very well. When you announce something like that, you must have realised, or somebody should have tapped you on the shoulder and said, you're going to stop the first home buyer marketplace in its tracks for the next month. And if there are people who are about to buy something, they'll say,
They're
hey,
all going to wait.
I'm going to wait. And there could be sellers who might have committed to something else in another part of the country. They're stuck. And so a lot of policy that comes out of government on paper looks absolutely fantastic, but like anything in real life, it doesn't. We have many situations where we've had graphic artists come in and redesign some of the branding around my company, around Century 21, and they design these signs. They look fantastic. So we go ahead and go with them, but when you put them up out the front of a property in a street, it doesn't look as good. And I remember one of them was where we had our name down the bottom of a sign. And after we went through this entire branding process, we recognised the fact that in all of the inner city suburbs, there are so many cars parked, you can't even see who the real estate agent is. Oh. So what you do on paper and what you do in the real world are two very different things.
We talk about those signs for a moment. You notice with some, I don't know whether it's particular to some real estate agents or whether it's particular suburbs or it's the whim of the proprietor, but some of the signs are very expensive with, lighting and little brochures attached to them, and they're really full on, whereas others you just get a little picture of the backyard and that's about it. That's
right, Kayley. Look, sometimes the agents make the mistake of putting a picture of the very house on the signboard, so you're seeing both at the same time. But you've got to, if you really want to see what fantastic signboards look like, and signboards that manage to get past every single part of what a local council would require to do, slip down to Melbourne. It is massive. Those signs are so big that if you do sell something on the day, you often need a ladder to climb up, put the sale sticker on. So they do a brilliant job of marketing. Honestly, I don't know how they get that through, because where I live in the Blue Mountains, it would not take long for the Blue Mountains Council to have me take down a sign if it was any more. And there was a push by local council, particularly in that area many years ago when I was a practicing agent, to take down signs. The council were taking down our signs because they needed a development application because of a certain size.
Really?
Yeah,
So that's what governs a lot of what you do is council regulation.
And you're taking away from the seller's opportunity, a person who pays their rates, you're taking away from their opportunity to promote their home. But some of the signs I have seen are bigger than a house. Bigger than a house. Crazy stuff.
Now, is winter a better time for buyers or sellers?
Yeah, better time for buyers. Because even though there's not as much stock on the market, there are a lot of people, for whatever reason, slow down their looking. If it gets a bit cold, we'll go next weekend, or if it starts raining. I always tell people the best time to look at a property is when it's raining, for a couple of reasons. You're going to be one of the few people going out there, and secondly, in addition to this, and you listen to this, John, you're going to get to find out what a house looks like when it's pouring down rain. You get to find out what's really leaking, what's really working, and what's not. And so there's definitely an opportunity, because some people dress up their properties to present it, which is really good, but sometimes they dress them up a little bit more than maybe they should. If you watch some of those home shows where they send couples in to redecorate, it's amazing how quickly they get things done. It always bothers me as to whether the quality is up to scratch.
Yeah, okay.
So.
I was doing some daydreaming the other day on realestate.com, and one of the places I always joke about moving to when I get older and retire is Mullaney up in the hinterland in Queensland.
Yes.
And I was looking at real estate there, and there was a house, a beautiful old Queenslander up on a hill, magnificent looking home. And I did the walking tour through it. I think it might have been one of those lottery homes that someone had won and put straight on the market, because it was so perfect. It looked like it had never been lived in. The furniture was perfect. Everything was perfect. And I thought, this is one of those homes. Someone's won it on one of those lotteries. And
it would
just
look
put it
like
straight
that,
on the
wouldn't
market.
Or they've had somebody come in and decorate it.
Exactly.
I won't name the hotel, but there's a magnificent photograph of the view from this hotel's balcony, and it's a stunning view down through the Blue Mountains. But the hotel has got that view out the back, but it is located between the Great Western Highway and the railway line. It sits between the two.
Right.
But the view is
So what are you
stunning.
suggesting?
I'm saying if you're an overseas guest, you're going to come to this country expecting something absolutely stunning
And
for
look over the
$75 a night. So sometimes these properties are dressed up fantastically, and you get there, and I've always said to agents, don't oversell a property, because people, when I'd say to young buyers, look, I've got a home, I think it suits you, I think it's absolutely everything you told me you want. Well, the mistake I made there was that somebody's dream home in their head and what they can afford are two different things. And when I would say to them, it's absolutely everything you want, straight away they go through this process of their dream home. And when they would come out to a property I'd show them, they always seemed disappointed. And it took me a while to learn that sometimes, overselling is an issue, and that you should always present a property strong enough for somebody to want to come and look at, but don't oversell the concept.
So maybe say this property ticks some of your boxes, I think, and then they got their curiosity. One of our team members here, Andy, went to an open house on the weekend, and in one of the bedrooms there were half a dozen cages with snakes in them, big fat pythons and little snakes as well, and his wife wouldn't even walk into the room, left the open house straight away.
Right.
If you're the agent trying to sell that place, what do you do? How do you get around that?
Let me just turn around and look at Andy, make sure it wasn't one of ours. Andy? Wasn't Century 21 office? Okay, no, it wasn't all right. I would say the problem there started with the agent, first and foremost. I mean, if people are scared of snakes, and most people would be, especially in the city. You hardly ever see them. Where you live in the country, where I grew up in Crookwell, you see them sliding through your backyard. But in the city, you wouldn't see them. And most people wouldn't even walk in. It's the agent's responsibility to make sure that they present the property effectively. And if the owner of that property would not let them do that, then it comes down to the owner and whether the owner is really that motivated to sell. Because if you put two cars alongside each other, Kayley, and one of them's filthy dirty and the other one is clean and beautifully clean, but they're both new, you're always going to be
Go for
attracted
the
to
clean
the clean
car.
one. Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
We'll come back with more after the break on Talking Lifestyle.
Thanks.
There are some great advantages in being the world's largest real estate company. For a start, your Century 21 local office uses the best technology and knowledge base in the world. Combined with the fact that each office is independently owned and operated, your local Century 21 agent knows your city, your suburb, your town and your street. It also means Century 21 agents can offer a huge range of resources and experience, including information from over 300 offices around the country. It's no surprise Century 21 is the fastest growing real estate brand in Australia. Buying, selling or looking for a new home to rent, contact your local Century 21 office and find out why they really are smarter, bolder, faster. Visit century21.com.au. Now, not since Tasmania's days as a penal colony has the state been good at retaining residents. Traditionally, there's been a brain drain with all the bright young things departing for the bright lights of the mainland as soon as they finish school. But now the tide is turning, and according to economist Saul Eslake, the Apple Isle actually has net migration. This is in part thanks to great value in the property market and a supreme lifestyle. Elizabeth Redman is a property reporter for The Australian, and she's been writing about the return to Tassie. Hi, Elizabeth.
Hello, thanks so much for having me.
Yes, hello, Elizabeth. Charles Tarbey, we've spoken before.
Hi, Charles. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Good to have you on the show.
Elizabeth,
Thanks for having me.
So who's migrating to Tasmania?
Well, it sounds like it's a bit of a mix. So Saul Eslake made the point in the story that I did for the Weekend Australian this weekend just gone, that some of the migrants are actually more senior or mature age workers who are able to work as a consultant, live in Tasmania, have a great lifestyle, and then travel when they need to. But also I spoke to some real estate agents who are seeing young families who've moved away for career opportunities. Perhaps they've bought a house in Sydney, they're able to sell that house, and with the funds from selling the house, they're able to come back to Tasmania and get a great job and have a great lifestyle there.
Well, let's have a look at property prices, because there's an awful lot of value in a place like Hobart. What's the median house price there?
The median home price in Hobart is $350,000, and that covers both houses and apartments. But it's a pretty big gap if you've been in Sydney. The latest figures that we have for the end of May are that the median home price in Sydney is $872,000. So if you're selling something there, you can buy something fabulous in Hobart.
It's a massive difference, isn't it? We were talking to the gentleman that runs C21 in Century 21 in Davenport a few weeks back, Elizabeth, and they're talking about prices, a median price in that area of under $3 and sub $250, I think it was. John, if you remember, I think John and Sam from here decided that they might even want to move back to Tassie. Sam's from Hobart originally.
Yes, he is. Yeah, well, yeah. Is the market experiencing growth from a price perspective, Elizabeth?
Yes. So over the last year, in Hobart, home prices are up almost 6%, which seems like a reasonable increase. But actually, Sydney and Melbourne both went up more than 11% over the same time frame. So if you're trying to get into the market, it's growing more slowly than Sydney and Melbourne, but also it looks much more affordable as well. So it's growing from a lower base.
So a lot of people do you think of giving up on Sydney and Melbourne and just saying, I'm out of here, like you said, and perhaps working from home down there or commuting?
That's certainly what we're hearing. And I mean, that's been kind of well documented that buyers are just kind of giving up in Sydney and looking at maybe areas that are more traditional commute. Maybe they're looking at Wollongong or the Central Coast. But certainly with, I think some people are racking up some frequent flyer points and are saying, let's move even further south. Let's move down to Tassie.
I know one Macquarie executive that actually lives on the Sunshine Coast in Queensland, and he's in Sydney quite often. He jumps a plane, comes down. It doesn't take long, because you can pretty much work from anywhere nowadays. You could be sitting on a beach in Bali and still run your business or run your career. I think it's about results nowadays. That's certainly what I look for from my team. It's about results, not how many hours they put in. So a place like Tassie, for people who've lived there before, made some money on the mainland, can go back and buy something, what appears to be a lot cheaper, is a fantastic opportunity.
Elizabeth, do you think a lot of it's to do with Tassie's become, particularly Hobart, very trendy in the last few years? We've got the gallery, the Mona Gallery is opened, and that gets about 300,000 visitors a year. We recently had the Mofo Festival, which I think just wound up on the weekend in Hobart, and that has become so popular now that P&O Cruises have put a cruise ship specifically to take mainlanders down there to attend the Mofo Festival, which is just amazing. So do you think it's got back on people's radar because it's becoming trendy?
Absolutely, and certainly my Instagram feed was full of pictures of people at the Mofo Festival enjoying themselves over the last couple of weeks. I think as well as one-off events like that, I think kind of the hospitality industry in Hobart particularly is changing quite fast. So some people are drawn down there for a holiday or a particular festival and then maybe see what's going on there and see there are great new restaurants opening, there are hotel rooms opening. It seems to be more trendy all the year round as well as at those buzzy times.
Are there plenty of jobs down there?
It sounds like there are more jobs in industries like hospitality, tourism and the hotel industry, also construction. There are a bunch of skyscrapers going up that have created more jobs in construction. Also, the aged care industry is set to grow quite fast. And also people are in a position, like we said, to create their own jobs. To work from anywhere.
So, Elizabeth, I guess people could sell up in all other parts of Australia and buy in Tassie. Do you think that Hobart would give a good rental return?
Rental returns are certainly looking more attractive in somewhere like Hobart than they are perhaps in Sydney, because prices have been going up so fast in Sydney. Rental returns there are starting to look not quite as appealing. So certainly we've been hearing from agents that some buyers are buying to rent in Tassie now with a view to moving in later. So kind of drawn by the rental opportunities for the moment, but thinking about moving there in future.
So maybe there would be, for people who are considering a move to Tasmania, to not sell your property here first, go down there, rent for 12 months, see if you like it.
Correct, yeah.
And then get out.
And also, Kayley, you've got people that can't afford to buy in Melbourne but could afford to buy in Hobart, so that could be their first property. They may not get any major government benefits, but they'll get into the market in what seems to be a growing marketplace. And it'll continue to grow because the wave coming out of the capital cities does eventually impact on all regions across Australia. So eventually the prices will go up, but they're always the slowest to go up. So this is why when people are out there in a frenzy trying to buy in capital cities, those that sit back and make good offers at the start of a boom in smaller regional areas are the ones that do very, very well from capital growth. Okay.
Now, Charles, you mentioned Devonport before.
Yeah.
Elizabeth, what about Launceston and some of the other the little cities or towns in Tasmania?
So certainly Hobart seems to be the focus of where several of these families are returning to. But, it's not a particularly big state. And actually I have a personal friend who's about to move to Launceston. And, looking at that as a great place to raise his family after living in Melbourne for quite a number of years, hoping that will be a great place for his kids to grow up. So certainly, there's a draw, I think, from some of the more regional areas from buyers who are interested in perhaps even more attractive prices and, perhaps quite a relaxed lifestyle and less sitting in traffic than they might have in some of the East Coast capitals.
Oh, yeah, there's no traffic in Tassie, that's for sure. And you've got the Cadbury factory there. Doesn't get any better than that. Elizabeth, thank you so much for your time. Thanks. Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Elizabeth Redman there, the property reporter for The Australian. And we'll be back after the break to talk about Around the Grounds. Now, time for us to go around the grounds thanks to Century 21's extensive national network for real estate agents. It's always interesting to get a snapshot of a particular region and learn a bit more about the area with the help of a boots-on-the-ground local expert. And joining me now is Terry Alderman. He's from Century 21 in Frankston in Victoria.
Yes, and very big boots to fill too. Terry's an incredibly experienced real estate practitioner who knows that area inside out, and he's one of the go-to people for a lot of people joining in the industry that if they want to know really how to stay in the industry for a long time. Terry's the guy. He just knows all of the processes and methods that keep his clients very happy.
Rightio.
How are you, Terry?
There's a wrap, Terry.
Thanks very much.
You can send me a thank you card later, mate.
I will. Bye, Kayley.
Hey, Terry, tell us about your area. Where exactly are you and what's unique about it?
Yeah, well, I guess Frankston is the area that we operate from. It's about 40 kilometres from the Melbourne CBD. It's a city in its own right. So we're about an hour away from the city by train. It's the gateway to the Mornington Peninsula. So it was an old fishing village back in the 1850s, and now so we're basically on the beach. My office is probably 30 or 40 metres away from the sand. So a lovely place to work, but more importantly, a very nice place to live. So,
it's an interesting place that you'd know, Penrith, and they used to call Frankston Penrith by the sea.
Oh,
so
okay.
Yes, so you've got a range of. And the interesting thing with Penrith, you've got your Leonay, your Emu Heights, your River Road, your Nepean Avenues, which are all can be multi-million-dollar properties, and then you go right back to the first home buyer. And Frankston has that range. Terry, tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the broad base is quite unique in this area insofar as we could be dealing with properties first home buyer or investments in the low 200s, one day to properties in the millions with bay views the following. So it offers lots of different property opportunities for a broad range of people. So it's a great place to work, and again, it's a great place to live.
And what sort of buyers are you seeing in the area? You're seeing sort of people who can't afford in Melbourne in the CBD are sort of moving like they do in Sydney, away from those inner city areas.
I guess, very, very similar, Kayley. That we find that over the years that people have been pushed away from the city, from the city of Melbourne, and we're finding now that that wave has come down towards Frankston. And property owners there now are reaping the benefits of that. But we're getting first-home buyers in that lower range, and certainly people that see great value in Frankston. That, in my mind, that Frankston is really being undervalued for a number of years.
It's an area, Terry, that we predicted a year ago. We talked about on Sky Business a lot that that's the area I'd be investing in. The infrastructure down to Frankston has improved dramatically and continues to be improved. And you talked about where you're located. You go further south of where you are, and you end up in some of the best holiday locations in the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Mornington Peninsula is just a beautiful spot with golf courses, wineries and so forth. And we've got the new Peninsula Link now, which is a toll-free freeway. You can be down to the end of the peninsula in about 40 minutes. So it's absolutely perfect. What
attracted you to the area to sell real estate, Terry?
I think it's the diversity of the properties down here, Charles. We're not dealing with top-end properties all of the time. It's very rare that a client would come into the office and you can't satisfy their requirements, whether that be a $250,000 property or a multi-million-dollar property. So
yeah, I've got to also express I have an interest in Frankston in the office in that the rent roll, which is about 1,400 properties, is actually owned by myself. I have to declare an interest, Terry. That's all. I just had to declare an interest.
It's great, Charles, that you've got that interest because it keeps us busy. So,
good to hear.
But I suppose on that side of things, just the capital growth in the area has been outstanding. Properties that we were looking at 2 years ago, when we would have been appraising those in the high 2s, low 3s, and now selling for the high 4s, low 5s. So it's outstanding. The capital growth has been there, and I can't see it stopping. It's particularly strong at the moment.
All right, Terry, thank you. Thanks so much for that.
Terry, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us tonight, mate.
Terry Alderman there.
Thanks, Charles.
Thank you.
From Century 21 in Frankston in Victoria. Next up, Greg Andison. He's from Century 21 Liverpool in New South Wales. G'day, Greg.
Hi, Kayley. How are you doing?
Hey, Greg. And there's always a battle with Greg and I to see which one of us is the tallest, because we're both vertically challenged, and every now and then he stands on his tiptoes and he beats me. But Greg is an incredible real estate practitioner. He and I have had a working relationship for over 30 years now, probably a little more. He runs one of the most successful real estate businesses in the Liverpool area, and I wanted to talk about this area, Greg, because if you go backwards from your office or Liverpool, back up in through Green Valley and back up towards where the M7 has now connected most of Sydney, those areas were not that popular some time ago.
No, Liverpool and those other areas were frowned upon in the old days, it's very valuable properties these days.
Yeah, it adds to the point that we make on this show a lot, and that is a lot of people avoid suburbs that they've heard bad things about, but for me, that is a reason to go there. And the changes have come through now. You've got so many different suburbs. You've got multi-million-dollar properties. Who would have thought that when you started down there?
It's going through a transformation at the moment that is beyond anyone's imagination. It's smack bang in the middle of two airports. It's the M7, the M5. It's got two railway lines into the city, the old Granville Strathfield line and the East Hills line, which is really popular. So, yeah, the infrastructure's there and it's got a big future.
And again, in between two airports and now with Bankstown, I guess, and Badgerys Creek and Sydney Airport not far away. And those would have been reasons not to buy in your area when you go backwards, which is really funny, Kayley.
Yeah. A friend of mine bought a house in Liverpool as an investment property about probably 25 years ago, and we all laughed at him and said, what are you buying in Liverpool? Everyone's buying in the city, in the inner city, and he's the one laughing now. So.
He certainly is. Greg, I've noticed that your council's very proactive at Liverpool. I've seen some development sites on paper that are riverside, so you're looking at some of the old industrial areas alongside the riverbank that they want to turn into major developments and restaurant scene.
Yeah, it's very exciting actually. It's absolutely, the Georges River. Not many cities have a river passing through the middle of them, and they've never taken advantage of it previously. It's a beautiful thing, and they've like in years to come, they've got this walk where you can basically go from Liverpool right to Botany Bay. So.
Wow.
And the buildings that they're actually building at the moment, it's very typical of what they're doing in Parramatta. And it's like Liverpool's like a little brother of Parramatta, to be honest with you.
Is it the Georges River?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I remember going over the old Iron Bridge that's still there and looking down into that river, down into that area, and you'd never think that you would ever want to go down there half the time. So
it's nice now. Beautiful.
It's changed. Yeah, I did see that development because I know our project marketing division in the city has been approached by a developer with over 1,000 apartments they're going to be constructing in that area for us to market for them. So that's why I'm familiar with what's happening. And I get an invitation for your mayor every now and then to some mayoral function. I only met him once, but
we've had an election recently. It's a she now.
Oh, he's gone. He's gone. He's gone. Oh,
it's very pro development, and Liverpool's it's going to be a vibrant city centre. It's something we've lacked over the years, but now with all the development close into the CBD. It's going to be very viable for the restaurants and entertainment type businesses after 5 p.m. So, exciting times for Liverpool, for sure.
Can we talk price quickly?
Yes,
Kayley?
of course.
What sort of prices do you think you get a 2-bedroom apartment? Now, we don't call them flats and units anymore, Greg. So we've got to call it an apartment now. So a nice old 2-bedroom apartment in Liverpool, one of the older ones. What would you pay for something like that?
The older one's 2-bedroom apartment, around the $400,000.
See, that's very affordable, isn't it?
Exactly.
That's very affordable.
Yeah.
But again, most people want to get the new stuff or the new apartments coming out of the ground or the new houses out in the suburbs. But wow, I mean, what sort of rental return? Because you're an expert in this area. It has a substantial management.
Rental return about 4.5%. Gross.
Oh, that's good.
See, that's even better too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Greg, thank you so much. Great to speak with you.
Good to talk to you, Greg,
Thank
and
you.
I promise not to talk about the height jokes anymore with you.
Greg Andison
Thank you, Greg.
from Century 21 Liverpool in New South Wales, and we'll be back after the break to talk the weekend auction clearance rates. And this is Kayley Harris filling in for Nick Bennett, who's on leave for a couple of weeks, and joining me, Charles Tarbey. Charles, despite a cooling of major markets, there's still solid underlying demand, isn't there?
There certainly is. The demand is probably where it should be, Kayley. It was way too strong, and I think what we're feeling now is that we're coming back into what we would call a real estate market. I've always said there are only two types of markets we're ever in. One where we get the buyers up to meet the sellers' ridiculously high price, they call that a boom, and the other where we get the sellers down to meet a purchaser's, well, what they might think ridiculously low offer, and that's called real estate. And that's what we're in 90% of the time. And a lot of real estate practitioners, it takes a while for them to come around. Those agents that have been in a boom most of their career, say in the last 4 or 5 years, are the ones that are going to be struggling the most as we come into this new type of market.
Yep. Yeah. Okay, now auction clearance rates in Sydney and Melbourne held pretty steady, though volumes dropped slightly. So is this just a flattening until the spring boost? Let's chat with Tom Panos. He's an auctioneer and a 2-decade veteran of the business. Tom knows what's going on. He joins us again on Property Fast Track. G'day, Tom.
Hi, how you going?
Good.
Hello, Tom. Good to chat to you again and again.
Yes.
And tonight later.
Tom,
Yes.
Sydney bounced back a little bit this week with a preliminary clearance rate of 73%, and the number of auctions was down just a fraction. Are sellers realigning their prices to match the buyers that are out there, as Charles just mentioned?
I think they are. I think what's actually happening is 10 years ago, when a market transitioned, the amount of information took longer for vendors to actually pick it up. But the fact that people will go on a Facebook, Twitter, check the news constantly off their mobile phones, bad news actually can spread pretty quickly. So what actually happens is that I'm actually finding as I rock up and I meet my vendors that I'm auctioning on a Saturday, which is generally around 10 times on a Saturday, most vendors, when I say you realise the market has changed before the auction, they say to me, yeah, we fully understand that. We're not going to get the crazy price we would have got a few months ago. So the answer is yes.
Okay. Do you expect to see another jump this Saturday with the July 1 first home buyers changes coming into effect?
Not really, because the properties that are affected by the first home buyers stamp duty concessions are, generally speaking, and Charles will know, they don't typify your typical auction property that goes and gets reported in the auction results. First home buyer price ranges of $650,000 are more inclined to be going down a path of private treaty than an auction. So I don't expect it to be a major significant change to the clearance rate, but I do expect a lot of buyers that are going to be lining up, and I can tell you, I already know lots of agents have told me they've actually got offers and acceptance on properties, and they're actually not putting them through the system and dating them until July the 1st.
The clearance rate's up slightly in Melbourne as well, 72%. Which areas around Melbourne were strongest?
Look, it was pretty even all over Melbourne. You know, the interesting thing that's happening with Melbourne is that on May the 1st, the legislation changed where agents now have to quote figures. I actually think there's good buying opportunities in Melbourne at the moment. And the reason I say it is that a lot of buyers have been used to agents expecting that properties were going to sell for 100 or 200 over because they thought agents were underquoting. But the new legislation now from May 1 means that agents have got to quote the right numbers, but buyers still haven't been educated. So I actually think there's good buying opportunities at the moment in Melbourne. And I think, I think if you're out there looking, I think now's a good time to be looking in Melbourne, take advantage of a transitioning marketplace where buyers might actually think that what the agents are saying is not correct.
Tom, the interesting part about it all is I've never been of the view that the auction price in any way, shape or form should be disclosed in a range or anything of that nature. When I was auctioning and some of the auctions that I did for the various government departments, they went and got their own valuations done. They had a few agents give them appraisals because that's pretty much what most agents can do. And they would make their own decisions. And I remember one vivid auction where I stood there at the lectern and still did not have the reserve price until I started calling the auction. And then a representative from a government department handed me an envelope and off I went. Because I think when you start talking about price, you set expectations. And I don't think an auction should set expectations. An auction should be there for the benefit in the mainstream of the seller because it's their product. And that if somebody wants to buy it, they should bid for it. And all the problems we've had in the last few years have been agents underquoting, overpricing, all sorts of different things. There should be no price. It should be an auction.
Well, there's a guy that's been quoted on the weekend, Charles, is Keating's Real Estate, John Keating, I'm just reading here, who's claiming that he believes that the reserve prices should be disclosed at the first open for inspection, which is, I think, again, goes totally against what you say, which is free market forces should determine what a property is worth. And buyers are educated enough to make up their decisions by looking at comparables.
But what if a vendor is educated in that model and they decide to put a lower price in as reserve? They don't have to take it on the day. So is that then underpricing? Is that the same process?
Well, that's a very good point, actually. Is Mr. Keatings from Keatings Real Estate Directors listening to the show? He could maybe come up and try and tell us what the solution to that is, because you're absolutely correct. A vendor can actually change a reserve at pretty much any point till that fall of a hammer is down.
It's interesting. Tom, thank you so much. Really appreciate you having a look at those figures. We might chat to you another time about what's going on in Brisbane, because the clearance rate's down to around 30%, so something's going on there as well. Tom, thank you.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Property Fast Track. century21.com.au. If you're looking to sell your home, buy your next one, or find a reliable expert to manage your investment property, simply drop us a line and we'll achieve your real estate goals.
Thank you.
Charles,
Wonderful.
thank you.
Thank you.